Some books document history, some books visualize it. And some, like the World of Vacheron Constantin, do both with such sweep and depth that you don't just read the story of a watchmaker, you feel the evolution of an idea. This is not a fan book, this is a living archive of a dynasty. An illustrated chronicle that shows how one of the horologists' oldest manufacturers shaped and responded to centuries of culture, craft, and political change. This book, The World of Vacheron Constantin, is authored by Carole Lamblett and Laurette Cohen, and it is published in the early 1990s as a definitive study of Vacheron Constantin's heritage. Lamblett and Cohen were not casual observers. Their work draws on Vacheron Constantin's own archives, examining original photos, serial records, and annotated materials collected by the Maison and other historical sources. At roughly 400 pages, this is a serious reference volume, encyclopedic in scope, if I may, and it remains one of the most thorough English-language explorations of Vacheron Constantin's evolution from its founding in 1755 through the modern era, which today makes more than 250 years. What makes the World of Vacheron Constantin different from many brands and from many brand histories is not just how much it covers, but how it covers. Instead of only celebrating the milestones of the Maison, the book places objects in their cultural and historical context. So watches are shown alongside archival images of workshops, patrons, and moments in history, which for watches and politics is very important. This approach makes the story of Vacheron Constantin more than a chronology of dates and calibers. It becomes a narrative of craft, continuity, disruption, and adaptation. In that way, it reads less like a product guide and more like a cultural history of innovation. Because what is important is also the context of how the Maison has grown over the years. The book opens with the founding of the company by Jean-Marc Vacheron in Geneva in 1755 and follows the lineage of makers who sustained the firm through centuries of changing taste and of challenges. It shows how a humble cabinetier workshop grew into a manufacturer capable of making works of mechanical and artistic brilliance. Pocket watches that were as much status objects as they were timekeepers. This matters because it reminds us that the origins of horology were not predestined. They were contingent on the people, on the craft, and on context. One of the most fascinating sections of the book, called out by collectors and historians alike, is the archive segmentation. More than 100 pages of original black and white photographs from the early 1900s through the 1940s. These images aren't mere illustrations. They are documentary evidence, watches photographed with original movement numbers, annotated and preserved. This gave this book an early advantage over many later volumes. It didn't just describe heritage, it showed it with photography from the actual period in question. This is why many collectors regard the Vacheron Constantin, the World of Vacheron Constantin, as more than a coffee table book and more like a reference archive. One of the threads running through this book is how timepieces were used socially and politically. Pocket watches owned by royalty and elite figures who became status symbols as much as precision instruments. Works commissioned by aristocracy bear heraldic and decorative elements tied to that lineage. And then also technical innovations, like early complications, for example, which signal not only engineering achievement, but also social capital. This is not always stated directly, but the narrative empowers readers to see watches not just as objects, but as documents of cultural positioning, mirrors of power and identity in every era. The scope of the World of Vacheron Constantin is remarkable. It spans the transformation from cabinet workshops to modern manufacture. It shows how Vacheron Constantin navigated industrialization and global market shift. It places wristwatches, chronographs, and complications within broader design movements such as the Art Deco or the mid-century modernism. All of this is richly illustrated with both product imagery and contextual photos, a mix of art and documentary. Here's the political or soft power angle this book highlights. Vacheron Constantin is the world's oldest watchmaker in continuous operation, a fact that gives the Maison structural, cultural authority in horology. This continuity is a kind of institutional soft power, the ability to shape taste and standards simply by enduring, adopting, and producing beauty across centuries and across borders. Unlike brands that amplify through marketing spectacle, Vacheron Constantin influences through historical presence and cultural weight. That is a form of political influence, quiet, structural, and deeply embedded in cultural memory. This book shows something very important, that Vacheron Constantin didn't raise in vacuum. It raised together with a whole world around it, in politics, in art, in society, in innovation, and in philosophy, which is my favorite part of the book. While the volume was published decades before newer releases, many later texts built on the archive and narrative structure that the World of Vacheron Constantin pioneered. It helped establish expectations of how deep a manufacturer history could be. Not just listing models, but telling a continuous, evidence-based story. But not only the history of the brand, the history of the whole world where the brand flourished. While the brand was growing and innovating, where was the world going? Here is why I love this book. Most watch books tell you what was made. The World of Vacheron Constantin tells you why it mattered. It doesn't just show the objects, it shows people, eras, and decisions behind them. That's the mark of a book that isn't just about watches, it's about why watches matter in history. The researcher and the academic in me enjoyed reading the context where these beautiful masterpieces that as watch collectors we enjoy were made on. This storyline makes this book my absolute favorite book, if you didn't understand that up until now. So, the World of Vacheron Constantin is a living archive, a bridge between past, present, showing how craft, culture, and identity evolved together. But let me ask you, do you think that continuity across centuries gives a brand authority or just a heritage weight? Which historical watch stories from the 18th and 19th century still resonate with you today and why? And also, I'm curious, how do you think watches carry memory differently than other objects? I would love to hear from you, so drop me a comment, send me a message. Tell me the next book that you want, because this series isn't just about watches, it's about why they continue to matter even today. This is Watches and Politics, friends, so subscribe, share with a collector friend who live for context and depth, and I'll see you in the next chapter.